huge lawsuit. Huge. These cops had no idea what they were doing. Wonder what they didn't know what they were doing. Check it out.
Welcome to Police Interactions. This episode covers filming police officers, First Amendment retaliation, and breaches of the peace, and is brought to us by a private submission. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. On July 23, 2022, animal rights activist Curtis Vollmer attended a Pioneer Day celebration in Beaver, Utah, along with several other members of the animal rights organization Direct Action.
Animal rights activists are some of the craziest people on earth. You cannot convince me otherwise.
Action everywhere. The activists hope to engage the community in conversation about an upcoming trial for two animal rights activists who are facing criminal charges for having filmed conditions inside the local Smithfield Foods facility and rescuing two dying piglets while they were there. Originally, the activists hoped to set up a booth, but upon arrival, were told that they needed a permit. So Mr. Vollmer chose to stand on a public sidewalk near the festival instead. After handing out flyers and obtaining signatures for a petition against Smithfield Foods for several hours, Mr. Vollmer was approached by officers from the Beaver County Sheriff's Office.
You have to have a permit.
Permit for a sidewalk?
Sergeant, how you coming in so strong, man?
Let me get my camera on too.
Sure.
Okay. You're not to
This
be
is not
down
a good
here
look.
Wait, isn't your camera supposed to be on at all times?
You're not to be spreading.
This is not a good look.
You're not supposed to be down here.
What
This
you
is
gonna do about
public
it?
property.
You're not to be down here.
What you
doing
gonna
this.
do about it, boy?
Do you realize that your company caused a problem in our community?
Do you have anything relevant to say to me?
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I've asked you to stop.
Okay, I'm on public property.
You need to stop. You realize you're not wanted in this community and you've been asked to leave?
I don't care.
I know you don't care. That's the problem with your group. You just don't care about people or anybody. Do you understand? You've been asked to leave.
All of this for handing out some flyers. This is how much promotion.
All of this because your group has been a direct influence on shutting down Smithfield Foods.
Irrelevant.
You don't realize that's the major employer in our county?
Irrelevant.
You don't think I know that?
There's a lot of people that have lost their jobs and you come into this community.
Well, if Smithfield Foods was doing their job correctly and not trying to sell dying piglets as food or whatever the hell they're doing, well, it wouldn't have been a problem, wouldn't it? Stop cutting corners.
Community and pour salt into the wounds of the people that have lost their jobs.
Sounds like a personal.
It's not the intent.
You need to well, I don't care what the intent is. What you're doing is causing a disturbance in the community.
I'm not trying to cause a disturbance. I'm just trying to have conversations with people.
You are.
And if people don't want to talk with me, I say thanks for your time and on with your day.
Okay. I'm going to stand right here and I'm going to tell people not to talk to you.
Then fine, do that. This
Yeah,
is great content for us.
You can do that.
Absolutely ridiculous. This is
ridiculous?
is very anti-free speech.
It's
I
not.
never
It's
gave
not.
you permission to put me on your film.
No.
On your camera.
Okay,
It's
are
all
you
your
a public servant?
property.
Yes, I am.
Okay, well then you can be filmed.
No, I cannot.
Yeah, you can.
Not a volunteer, public servant.
Okay,
It
you got a
doesn't
badge
matter.
on.
You're still on public
I'm a
property.
volunteer.
You're still on public property.
Don't get your camera off.
You need to stop.
Stop what, sir?
Right
Okay,
there.
it's causing a problem in our community.
I'm not trying to cause any problems.
You are.
Bro, these people are old, fat, and don't know anything.
Listen, sir. When someone's asking you like this, a public servant, he's a volunteer type thing. He's asking you nicely to please don't film him.
Okay.
And we're asking you to stop filming him.
Okay, I won't film him.
We're giving you a lawful order to not do that.
Okay.
If you violate that lawful order, then,
Sure.
then you're causing a disorderly conduct
Okay.
issue.
We're not filming. We're not filming him anymore. Okay. We're filming you two.
One of the volunteer officers informs Mr. Vollmer that he does not consent to being filmed, and when Mr. Vollmer protests, Deputy Laws states that he was given a lawful order not to film the officer, and he will be committing the crime of disorderly conduct if he disobeys it. Under Section 76-9-102 of the Utah Code, quote, an individual is guilty of disorderly conduct if the individual refuses to comply with the lawful order of a law enforcement officer to move from a public public place or an official meeting, or knowingly creates a hazardous or physically offensive condition by any act that serves no legitimate purpose, or intending to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly creating a risk of public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, the person engages in fighting or in violent, tumultuous, or threatening behavior, makes unreasonable noises in a public place or an official meeting, makes unreasonable noises in a private place, which can be heard in a public place or an official meeting, or obstructs vehicular or pedestrian traffic in a public place or an official meeting. While the statute does prohibit disobeying a lawful order to move from a public place or official meeting, it does not allow for a disorderly conduct conviction for refusing any other lawful order, including an order to stop filming. Further, even if the disorderly conduct statute did make it illegal to disobey such an order, a court would likely conclude that the order to stop filming a police officer in public was not lawful. In the 2022 case of Irizarry versus Yahia, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over Utah, officially recognized the, quote, First Amendment right to film the police performing their duties in public, and held that this right was clearly established law as of 2019. In reaching the conclusion, the court looked to, quote, 3 well-established First Amendment principles that show that filming the police performing their duties in public is protected activity. First, the court noted that, quote, a major purpose of the First Amendment was to protect the free discussion of governmental affairs. Filming the police and other public officials as they perform their official duties acts as a watchdog of government activity, and furthers debate on matters of public concern. Additionally, the court reasoned that, quote, without some protection for seeking out the news, freedom of the press could be eviscerated, that there is, quote, an undoubted right to gather news from any source by means within the law, and that video recording is, quote, unambiguously speech creation, not mere conduct. Given the incontrovertible legal precedent, a court would almost certainly determine that Mr. Vollmer was exercising his First Amendment rights by recording the volunteer officer, and the officer's orders that he stop were a clear violation of those rights.
It's only drawn more attention to why we're here, so I appreciate this. Thank you. Do you know about the Smithfield trial happening?
You don't have a permit to approach people about your product.
Okay, I don't need a permit to talk to people on a public sidewalk.
You're causing a problem in the community.
I'm not. I'm asking people if they want to have a conversation. If they
Who does he think he is? Security of the entire area? You're causing a disturbance in the community.
They know, I let them go.
People
That's
have come to us.
Sure.
They do not want you here.
Okay. That's fine.
Then I'm keeping the peace and I'm asking you to leave.
All we're asking people.
No, I'm asking you to leave.
Okay. Here's an example of what I'm doing. Have you all heard about the Smithfield trial?
Okay.
Okay, they don't want to talk. Okay, that's it. I move on. If people don't want to talk, we move on.
Everybody, you don't.
Have y'all heard about the Smithfield trial? The upcoming Smithfield trial?
These are the people that are trying to shut down Smithfield. Okay?
It's not true.
These are the people that are trying to shut down Smithfield.
It's not true.
Mr. Vollmer attempts to speak with multiple members of the public, and each time, Deputy Woolsey tells them not to speak with him because he is trying to, quote, shut down Smithfield. While police officers do have First Amendment rights as citizens of the United States, as government employees, they can face consequences for their speech in ways that private citizens cannot, particularly for speech they make while on duty and in uniform. As the Supreme Court described in the 1983 case of Connick versus Myers, decisions as to when a government employer can take corrective or disciplinary action against an employee for their speech must, quote, seek a balance between the interests of the employee as a citizen in commenting upon matters of public concern and the interest of the state as an employer in promoting the efficiency of the public services it performs through its employees. Similarly, the court noted in the 1994 case of Waters versus Churchill that for speech by a government employee to be protected by the First Amendment, it, quote, must be on a matter of public concern, and the employee's interest in expressing herself on this matter must not be outweighed by any injury the speech could cause to the interest of the state as an employer in promoting the efficiency of the public services it performs through its employees. Here, while Deputy Woolsey's speech was undoubtedly on a matter of public concern, a court would most likely determine that his interest in expressing his opinion at the time, and in the way that he did, was outweighed by the potential injury to the state's interests, as his actions likely constituted so-called First Amendment retaliation against Mr. Vollmer for his protected speech. In general, the First Amendment prohibits the government from retaliating against an individual for exercising protected expression. As the 10th Circuit noted in the 2000 case of Worrell versus Henry, quote, any form of official retaliation for exercising one's freedom of speech, including prosecution, threatened prosecution, bad faith, and
I knew that was a bad thing if cops come after you for your freedom of speech, but I didn't know that was in the First Amendment. I thought that was literally a policy or something like that.
Investigation and legal harassment constitutes an infringement of that freedom. The decision also explained that to succeed in a First Amendment retaliation claim, the plaintiff must prove that they were engaged in constitutionally protected activity, that the government's action caused them, quote, to suffer an injury that would chill.
The bigger they get, the bigger their paycheck is.
A person of ordinary firmness from continuing to engage in that activity, and that the government's action was, quote, substantially motivated as a response to the plaintiff's exercise of constitutionally protected conduct. In this situation, Mr. Vollmer was unquestionably engaged in speech that was protected by the First Amendment, and Deputy Woolsey essentially admitted that he was taking this action because he did not like Mr. Vollmer's past and current speech. As to whether Mr. Vollmer suffered an injury because of Deputy Woolsey's conduct, the 10th Circuit determined in the Irizarry case we discussed earlier in this episode that because, quote, physical and verbal intimidation are cognizable injuries.
Really?
A YouTube journalist suffered an injury when an officer stood in front of his camera and shined a flashlight into it. Now quoting, making it difficult, if not impossible, to continue recording a potentially critical moment of the police activity. The court also noted that, quote, this injury alone would chill a person of ordinary firmness from continuing to film the traffic stop. Because the 10th Circuit has recognized that interfering with an individual's exercise of protected speech can constitute a sufficient injury for a First Amendment retaliation claim, a court would likely conclude that Mr. Vollmer had a claim against Deputy Woolsey for his attempts to dissuade individuals from talking to him.
More importantly, I'm more important for your safety.
We're not here to talk about that.
No, let me talk.
Go ahead.
I'm more worried about what people here how they feel towards you in your protest. So I'm more or less walking.
We're not protesting.
Let me finish. Don't cut me off, please. I'm more worried about your safety and about some of these citizens being upset with you than anything.
Bro,
Deputy Laws informs Mr. Vollmer that they are taking these actions out of consideration
people
for his safety and are trying to protect him from the many local citizens they claim are angry with him. However, courts have long recognized that police officers generally cannot censor an individual's controversial speech, even for their own protection. This issue, known as the problem of the heckler's veto, has been addressed in numerous Supreme Court decisions. And although speech is not protected by the First Amendment when it creates a clear and present danger of riot, disorder, or other immediate threat to public safety, as the court noted in a footnote in the 1960 order, increased crowd outbursts to prevent several disturbances, and, quote, this concludes discipline of unfair anger at testing soul to that pain hurt. It is clear that most of order not censor Mr. Vollmer's speech based on the justification of preventing a breach of the peace.
When you come in on a day that people are trying to enjoy the holiday, and you stir them up, we get calls
who is this
complaints
about having conversations. They need to look in the mirror. If
Who-
people are
I'm sorry, you shouldn't laugh at kids. But why is he just standing there with his mouth full? I'm sorry.
about having
I'm sorry, but
conversations, they need to look in the mirror.
why is he standing there? Bro, is that his son? Why is his face not censored?
People are so triggered and so upset from having a conversation.
sorry.
They need to look
I'm so sorry, but it's so random.
in the mirror.
It's so random. Yo. Okay, let me listen to the cop. Oh my God, perfect freeze frame.
calls and complaints about
having conversations. They need to look in the mirror. If people are
and you stir them up, we get calls
Hey, yo, props to the Asian guy. He's been filming the whole time.
complaints about
having conversations, they need to look in the mirror. If people are so triggered and so upset from having a conversation, they need to look in the mirror.
You know what? You need to have a little bit more compassion.
Okay.
Compassion.
With people.
Okay.
Okay, you don't understand the Smithfield has shut down.
Following the interactions covered in this episode, the deputies cited Mr. Vollmer for disorderly
Cited for
conduct
what?
and ordered the activists not to, quote, bring up the issue again at the local horse races and rodeo, which were taking place later that evening. On
you
August
can't tell
2nd,
not to do that.
2022,
Oh,
Mr.
gosh.
Vollmer and his fellow activists filed a federal lawsuit
you
alleging
go.
that the Beaver County deputies, along
Countersuit.
with the sheriff himself, had violated their First Amendment rights. They also submitted a motion requesting a preliminary injunction that would prevent the sheriff's office from prohibiting speech on public sidewalks or parks, threatening citation or arrest, or citing or arresting the activists for engaging in public outreach, handing out literature, and soliciting signatures.
do
As
it.
of the date of this episode, the case and the
Please,
motion
don't
for
say
preliminary injunction are
Don't
both
say-
still pending.
Oh
I reached
my
out to the Beaver County
God.
Sheriff's Office, but I was
Bro,
unable
ain't
to
nobody
obtain a
gonna
comment
respond.
this time. Overall, the Beaver County officers
F.
get an F for blatantly violating Mr. Vollmer's First Amendment rights, actively hindering his attempts to engage the community in dialogue, and
I'm falling for this whole clickbait too. It says huge lawsuit. Yeah, it's a huge lawsuit, but what's the settlement? I want to know, how much did Buddy make? It's always pending, and then when the pending's over, oh yeah, they got like $5,000. Yeah, and the cops said they're gonna